There we go. So today, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're covering parts of lesson 10. I wanted you to read lesson 10 if you have the textbook so that you're familiar with the extensions or the file formats that are compatible with web design. And what we will be doing today is working in Photoshop, not Dreamweaver, but Photoshop, so that you'll understand how to prepare your images for the web and how to properly name them. That's really, really important. Right off the top, there are 3 different file formats that are compatible for the web. And I will verbally state this, and then I'm going to show you how to save it in the 3 different file formats. That's JPEG, GIF, and PNG. Okay, so that's JPG or JPEG, GIF or GIF, however you want to pronounce it, .GIF, and PNG. Those are the 3 file formats that are compatible. So as you can see, I have a photograph that I took of my dog Bagel here at the beach, and it's in a Photoshop file. And I have over to the right here, if you look at layers, I have adjustment layers. I have all sorts of things that I've done that to make this look a little bit nicer than the way it actually looked when it was taken during the day. In fact, if we go all the way to the bottom and I turn on that, and I just look at the bottom, you can see that I had to rotate it and I had to extend the background and the side and everything. It just, you know, that's how that works. You know, that's what you can do in Photoshop. So once I've created it in Photoshop, I save it as a Photoshop file, and that has been saved. So I'm going to do it again. And it really, right now, the resolution is unimportant. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'll save it on my computer. And I'm going to create a new, on my desktop, I'm going to go ahead and create a new, there we go. On my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder. And it's, I'll name it Optimize for Web Art 196. Okay. So the image that I'm going to save in there is a Photoshop file. So it's my recommendation that your original image should always be a Photoshop file or one that's editable, and it can be any resolution you want for the web. Now this is a higher resolution, and how do I know that? Is that if I go to image size, I can see that the size of this, the width is 20 inches, the height is 14.5 inches, and the resolution is 240 pixels per inch. So number one, that's way too big for the web. You know, the screen isn't that big, even if it's a 27-inch monitor, which I have behind me or in front of me. It doesn't have to be that big, especially at 240 pixels per inch. So what I need to do is I need to change this. But before I do, again, I've saved my original as a Photoshop file. And what I prefer to do is I like to duplicate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to select Duplicate. Okay, so now I have a copy of it. And if I want, I can rename this when I'm ready to go. And I can close the original so that I don't mess that one up, because maybe later on, you know, I want to make little wallet-size photographs of my dog Bagel. And I want them to be a nice high resolution. I want them to be quality, and I want them to be, you know, the highest that was available with my phone, which is 240 pixels per inch. But this only needs to be, because it's for the web, and this is the next part that's really critical, it need only be 72 pixels per inch, and that's it. So what I'm going to do, because when I save this in one of the 3 file formats, I need to collapse all of this. I need to flatten it. And then if I need to go back and edit it, I need to go back to my original Photoshop file. One of the old style rules of thumb for editing images is that you never JPEG a JPEG. And I don't recommend you ever edit a JPEG. You convert it to a Photoshop file first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just flatten this one because I already have the other one saved and it's in my folder. So I'm going to go down to the bottom here and I'm going to flatten the image. And I'm just going to go ahead and collapse all the unnecessary layers and I'm set to go. Now, if I want, I can go ahead and I like, just as a good habit, and this is what I do in Photoshop all the time, is I never work on the original layer. I create a copy of it first. So I'm going to hit Command J, and that makes a copy of it, and I turn off the background layer. So if I ever need to get back to that original image, I can. Now, the next step is that I'm going to get it ready for the web. I'm at the present working in inches, and I need to change that to pixels because that's how images and web design is measured, is in pixels, not in inches. The other thing that I need to do is I need to change the resolution from 240 to 72 pixels per inch. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to image size. I'm going to go back to that. And you can see that it's 240 and that at the moment I have the width, the height, and the resolution linked to one another. Well, for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to resample just so I'm resizing this image. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to 72 pixels per inch because that's really all you need for the web. And I'm going to go ahead and enlargements, you would want to preserve the details. So now it's much smaller, and it's also a much, much smaller file size. Okay. The next step is that maybe I need to crop this, and I want to make it a square format instead of rectangular format. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the crop tool here, and I'm going to use the width, the height, and the resolution at the top here. And instead of pixels per inch, I'm just going to, I'll use pixels per inch. So this will be measured in pixels. But notice that my rulers back here are still in inches. So what I need to do is to go to Photoshop and go to Preferences. And I'm going to go to, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to Units and Rulers right down here. And I'm going to switch from rulers from inches to pixels. And you can see this is a big honking file here. So I can either change the size under the image menu, that would work for me, but I can also do it with the options menu at the top here. So the width, since I decided maybe I want it to be a 500 by 500 pixel inch image. It's 72 pixels per inch. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to put in 500, and I need to make sure that I put px for pixel. If you don't, it might assume that it's in inches. And then I'm going to put in 500 again, 500 px, hit the tab key. And so this is my square format. And now I can go ahead and I can slide the image around underneath to get the best, possible crop for this. And I think that'll work kind of nicely. So Bagel here, part of her tail is cut off, but I can see her face nicely and everything else. Now the next step for me will be to crop it. And if I need to straighten it, I can, or if I need to make some adjustments a little bit here, but it will crop just fine. And I always prefer to work with a larger image first and then make it a little bit smaller. The other thing is that there's a little checkbox at the top here that says delete crop pixels. I never like doing that because what if I need to bring some of that back at a later date? So I make sure that that is unchecked. And I'm going to go ahead and put in 72 pixels per inch. So it's a low res. That's all you need. To give you a little bit of backstory, is that for the Mac, it's always been, screen resolution has always been 72 pixels per inch. And for the PC, unless it's changed, it's 96. So very low resolution. So even if you have a large resolution image on your screen, you're always viewing it at 72 pixels per inch or 96. You're never seeing the actual image at its final resolution. okay? Except in this case, this is what you would see on the screen, and that's what the web design is for, is to be viewed on a monitor or a touch screen or on a smartphone, something like that, okay? So now I can go ahead and crop it. Now, probably what I want to do is I want to save this again as a Photoshop file for web, and then I'm going to show you how to very easily save other files that you want that can be used for the web in the proper file format. And as I mentioned, I said they're going to be either JPEG, GIF, or PNG. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file again in the same folder. I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file again. Okay, so there's the other one. That was Bagel 3. Now I'm going to name this one the Bagel for Web, so I just know which one it is. While I'm here, I don't know how well you can see this, but naming your file is really critical. And I'll probably in Photoshop show you that in a few minutes. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. Number one, when you name a file, never start with a capital letter. There are some servers that do not recognize files that start with a capital letter. So later on, when we start uploading your HTML pages and publishing them, the first page that loads is always an index.html. You never want that index, the I, capitalized. The other thing is that you never put spaces between words. So as I'm naming this, notice that I'm using something called Camel Casing, so that you don't put spaces between words if the file name has multiple words. That's also a no-no. Another way that you can do that, if you want, and some people prefer, is that you can use an underscore between the words, and an underscore is just another character, so that's acceptable. If you need to add a numeral, like this is version 2 or something like that, then you can put that at the end, but don't start the name of your file with a numeral. That's a good practice. The other thing is no special characters. So don't use any ampersands, any exclamation points, anything like that. Just letters and numerals. And as I said, always start with a lowercase. And in this case, I, by habit, use what is called camel casing. So it's easy to read when I have multiple words without using any spacing at all. So I'll go ahead and I'll save that, like so. And now I'm ready to, excuse me, gosh darn, save this for the web. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this layer here, Command J, and I just want it to be as is. So I'm going to rename this file, and if I rename it, I can go ahead and I can name it bagel.jpg. That's all I have to do. And now what I can do, and this is one of the more recent additions to Photoshop, is that when I save it, I can go to File, and I can go to Generate Image Assets. Okay. And now what I can do is I need to go, let's go ahead and I'm going to hide this for a minute. And I'm going to hide this. And I'm going to go on my desktop, my messy, messy desktop. And I should be able to find my new folder here that I just created for all of you. And come on, come on, come on. Where did it go? My apologies. Let me move that. Anybody see that? Oh, optimize for web. There it is. Let me move it over here so I can see it. So when I double click on that folder, notice that here's my original, the Bagel version 3, and that's the high-res image. You can see that it's 290 or 200, yeah, 264, 67 megabytes. Big file for print. The one that I just saved for web is only 2.7 megabytes, but for a web file, that's still quite large. You'll also notice a new folder that it automatically added. It says, this is the Bagel for Web Assets. And when I use the little twirly and I twirl down here, you can see that I have my Bagel JPEG file in here, ready to go. Okay, very, very nice feature. Okay, so I'm going to bring that back. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring my image back in here. Let's go back to Photoshop, bring that back. And now I'm going to save it for some other file formats. So maybe one of the other things that I want to do with this is maybe instead of a square rectangular format, maybe I want to put Bagel in a circle or an ellipse or in an irregular shaped frame. With JPEGs, they can only be rectangular, and they do not, you cannot use transparency with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use over here, I'm going to use an elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to go ahead and make another copy of the JPEG file. So there, I can leave that visible, and I have another one on top here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make a selection on top here of a little circle on top here. And that looks pretty good, okay? And now what I can do is I can use down at the bottom here, I can add a clipping mask. And if I turn off these layers, you can see that I now have Bagel inside a circle. And I have the background that lies outside of the circle transparent. With JPEGs, you cannot do that. So you have two other options at your disposal. You can use an older format, which is a JPEG, or I mean a GIF, or you can use one of the newer file formats, which is PNG. And you would only need PNG 8-bit for that. If you use 24-bit, which is what we will use in a minute, then I can actually add transparency to Bagel and make her somewhat translucent. With GIF files, either they're totally opaque or they're totally transparent. You can't have anything in between. So now what I can do is I can rename this layer, okay, and I'm going to name it bagel.gif. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide this again, and it should have automatically updated that folder. And there we go. So here's my GIF file. If I go ahead and I look at this, so let's go ahead and let's look at Bagel Assets. And you can see that when I select the GIF file, you see it as a circle. You don't see it as a rectangle. There is no white background to that. And then I also have the JPEG. So I've saved the same image and multiple formats for multiple purposes very efficiently. And that's what I want you to think about. And again, focusing on how I named it, and I will cover that again before the end of this lesson and make sure that all of you understand that. That's really, really critical. Because it depends on the server that's being used and what will be acceptable to it. So I'm using kind of an old school system for saving files, and it works really nicely. So there you go. There's two of the three file formats that are set to go. So I'm going to do a third one here. Let's bring Photoshop back. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a copy of this one. So select this layer, Command J. Okay, and I'm going to turn this one off. Now, what if I wanted to be able to see through Bagel here? So in the opacity, I can go ahead and I can turn this down to maybe 50%. So it's, transparent, it's translucent. I can't save it as a GIF file and get the results that I'm looking for. It has to be a PNG. So I will rename the file here. And instead of bagel.gif, it's going to be bagel.png, PNG. Okay. And now it should automatically have updated, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide the file. And let's look back in here again, and you can see here's my ping file. It's automatically been looked at. Now it looks light and faint and kind of chalky, and that's because it is a transparent image. And that's the only way that you can add. I mean, you can add transparency in not Lightwave, what am I saying? In Dreamweaver. But I think this is a better way to go, and it's a default way of doing it. So now I've saved my image in 3 different file formats for the web. And in addition to that, I have saved it in 2 additional Photoshop file formats, one at a low-res square version for the web, and one at a high-res version that can be used for print. Okay? So that touches on that. So there's a few other things that I want to show you now. Let me bring Photoshop back. And let me go ahead and zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. So before I move on, do any of you have any questions that you have for me? No, no Q&A. No? Okay. Okay, so an older way of, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Go ahead here. An older way of saving for the web, let's go ahead and turn off some of these layers and go back and turn on my original one here. Is that back in the day, if, you know, if you weren't sure what file format you wanted to save your image as, or whether you wanted a high resolution or a high quality, medium, or low quality image. And back in the day when we had dial-up modems, you really had to pay close attention to the file size because at that time, no one had cable modems. Everybody had dial-up, you know, the 28.8 or 56K modems. And it took forever to download these images. So there was an old system of working, and what I can do from here, even though this is a Photoshop file, this was my original Photoshop, I can go to File, and I can go to Export, and I can go to Save for Web Legacy. And even though you don't have to use this anymore, I think this is really, really powerful. And really very nice, so that you can actually see a comparison. Because when you save it as a JPEG, maybe if it's going to be a teeny tiny file, it doesn't need to be a low resolution image. Or I mean a high quality image, maybe it only needs to be a small one. So when I use this feature, we can just see the original image. We can see the optimized version. You can see 2-up or 4-up. I always like to look at the 4-up myself for comparison. And that was what this was all about, was to compare and contrast between these images. So you'll notice over here in the upper left-hand corner to the left, it's the original image. And we can see that the name of it is thebagelforweb.psd, and it's 977K. By today's standards, not a very large image, okay? The one over here, if we save this as a very high JPEG image, notice that it went from 977K all the way down to 129K. And on an old 56K modem, that's really old, but in some parts of the world, they still have dial-up. So that will be one thing that we'll be talking about throughout the semester, is that you need to know who your audience is when you're creating a web, you know, a website. For our purposes, if you're designing for other art directors or clients who want to see beautiful high-end images of your artwork, then they're going to have a fast internet connection. But if you're selling widgets or it's an educational website for somebody in a third world country that has only dial-up, then you need to be very mindful of the size of images that you use. So in this particular instance, with a high quality, 24 seconds is a long time. And how do I know that? Or if you want to get a feeling for that, is stare at your computer. Stare at this image for 24 seconds and feel how long it is. That's just for one image to load. The next one here, if I select this one, this is a medium quality. And if I can't detect the difference, then this one from 24 seconds drops down to 51.65K, and it only takes 10 seconds to download. And then if I want over here a low quality, then this one would take 8 seconds. But what you need to do is to zoom in on these and to determine for yourself if you can discern a difference in quality. And when you can, then maybe you know that that's the time to stop and to maybe use the higher quality image. The other thing that you should think about, and it really, again, doesn't really pertain to us very much anymore, is that especially for your splash page or your home page that loads first, no page should really take any longer than 10 seconds to load. The entire page. So if I had just one image on it that took 24 seconds to load, then I have an issue. Then I've lost my audience. They're gone. Okay, so images need to load quickly. They need to be high quality, and this was a way of, this is still a viable way of checking. If you don't know or you're designing for a particular internet speed, if you click this little button here, you can change it to any of these other internet speeds. Okay, all the way down, you know, from a 9600 bits per second, all the way up to here, 2 megabits per second. That's the fastest. And if we select the fastest one, you can see that it's a non-issue. I mean, I could go really big with this. At the moment, it would take tops 2 seconds, if that, to load. So that's another nice feature. Or, you know, if you're just, you know, 1 megabit per second cable, again, that doesn't change either. It's 2 seconds. So that's a nice way to go. And the other thing that you can compare with is that if I go ahead and I select this one, and let's see what it looks like if I'm going to use a GIF file. And you think, well, you know, GIF, and I use just the monitor colors, and it's, you know, minimal, and it's usually there's a degradation in quality. I'm going to switch here back to 56K here. There we go. So this one would be, this would take 29 seconds to load. So it actually takes 4 seconds longer than this one. Can I repeat how you did the GIF? Oh, that is up here. You see in the upper right-hand corner, I had, usually by default, it's set to GIF, but these are the different file formats that you can use and compare for each quadrant. So I switched to GIF from there, right up here. You got that? Huh, David? Okay, so that's what you do. And then we can click on this one and let's see what this one looks like. Instead of a JPEG, let's see with a ping 8-bit. So again, this has the same number of pixels per, or bit depth as the GIF. And it's actually a little bit, it's actually a little bit faster than the GIF. But watch what happens if I use a 24-bit. It would take 95 seconds. So you don't want to do that. Okay, so that would, you know, if I were ready to save that, you know, if I wanted to save my JPEG here, then I could go ahead and say done, or I could select save and save it in the right location. Okay, so I'll cancel that. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to touch on, there's two things more that when you get images off the internet, how to deal with those and make sure that you can use them, because as soon as you publish them, if they're copyright protected, then you have infringed on somebody else's copyright unless they are allowing you to repurpose those images and modify them. So I want to cover that. The other thing is, remember I talked about the naming. So I'm going to go ahead on top of bagel here. I'm going to create some text just to show you how to name your image. So instead here, I'm going to go ahead and I'll say and I don't need anything fancy here, just so you can see what's going on. I don't need italic. I'm just going to use medium, and I'm going to use white so you can see what's going on here. So I'm going to say the bagel for the web. And if I know that it's going to be a JPEG, then I would put that. Okay, but when you're saving your original file as a Photoshop file, .psd, I like doing that because as soon as I save it in other formats, it already has the correct naming process here. Let me also go ahead and just use a sans serif typeface. I think that will work a little bit better. Instead of minion, let's go ahead and use myriad. There we go. Whoops, I forgot a character. Myriad, there we go. So the other way to save that, let's go ahead and duplicate that. So I'll take this layer and I'll hit Command J and I'll duplicate that. And I'm going to move this down just so you can see. Another way to save the file would be to go here, and instead I could use an underscore. So if you wanted space between the words, I could do that. That would be another legitimate way to work. So that works. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll make a copy of that. Let's go ahead and select J. And let's go ahead and move that down, just so you can see, again, some more here. Can't see that very well. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the other layers, just so you can see this. So that's typically how you do save. Make sure that you start with a lowercase, that you either use Camel Casing or an underscore, and that you notice that in the middle of the name, I can have capitals, just not at the beginning. Okay, what you don't want to do, so this would be a no-no, is start with a capital letter. So if I started with a capital T, don't do that. That's not okay. The other thing is, don't start with a numeral. That's not a good idea either. So don't do that. If you need to add a numeral to this, then add it at the end. So maybe I would want underscore 01 or 02 or something like that. So if I had multiple versions of this, that would be acceptable. The other thing that you don't want to do is, let's say I wanted to use a special character of some sort. So instead of for the web, I'll say bagel and the web. So if I come back here like so, and I said I wanted to use an ampersand, no, don't do that. No special characters, no ampersands, no exclamation points, no quotes, no whatever, because oftentimes, no dollar signs, because oftentimes those are used in writing code and it will get confused. So this is just to be on the safe side. Because if you do run into a problem with the visibility of your image and it uploading properly and publishing properly, then it's probably a problem with the name. That's one of the things. Okay, any more questions so far? No? So next and last thing that I wanted to cover today I'm going sort of quickly. And what I want you to do at the end of class is to either take an image off the internet or use one of your own that maybe you took with your phone, or you have a family image or something like that. And just as I've done with the bagel, I want you to save it in 3 different file formats. I want it to be, I want you to crop it so that it is 500 by 500 pixels. And I want you to save it as a JPEG. And then I want you to add some transparency to the background. So that will be saved as a GIF. And then I'll want you to save it with partial opacity or partial transparency, however you want to interpret that, as a ping. And that's what you'll put in your folder on Google Drive. Hopefully you'll have that done by the end of the week. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, so let me go ahead here and let's go back to, I think, here we go. I have Google here. There we go. So what I did is I did a search for, just a simple Google search for sunflowers. That's it. So what you might want to look at if you're planning on publishing them, for this class and for this assignment, it really doesn't matter. But what you might want to think about is to look at tools. And when you look at tools, I want to look at ones that are labeled for non-commercial reuse with modification. Or I could come down here. Maybe I want non-filtered by license, labeled for reuse with modification. Okay, so maybe I want those. I just want to see those, and you'll see, oftentimes a fewer number of them available to you. Maybe it will be by type, and all of them, will be typically JPEGs, GIFs, or PNGs. And then, since we don't need to worry about the resolution, because they will come to you is 72 pixels per inch, just make sure that they are at least 500 pixels per inch. Oh, show you how to create the ping in 8-bit or 24-bit. Yeah, I can do that. So this is where you're going to go to download your image. That would be my suggestion. And there are many that allow you to, through Creative Commons, allow you to download your image. So it doesn't have to be one that you have taken, but it would be, preferable, to be quite honest. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as this one I said for web is a ping, is a 8-bit ping and a 24-bit ping. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to go to File and I'm going to Export and I'm going to go Save for Legacy. And there might be a way that I can put this in the layers, rename it correctly, but I'm not sure at the moment. So I might have to look that up. It would be easier, and it will be, I know it will work 100% if I use Save for Web Legacy. So if I come back in here and I say I want Bagel for the web, I'm going to use this one, and let's do it as an 8-bit. Okay, so we'll start with this one as an 8-bit. And I need to name it somehow so that I know that it is that. I will probably know that by the file size, but I'm going to go ahead and save. So by changing that there, I can go ahead and save. It comes up. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I want to make sure that it's in the same folder as my other images. So where's Bagel's image here? It's optimized is what I named the folder, and optimized for web. So it'll be in here. So I'll just save it in here, and I'll say this will be ping, and then I'm going to put underscore, and I'm going to put 8-bit, just so that I know which one it is. And I'll go ahead and I'll save that there. And now it's saved as a ping file, but smaller. Okay. Now I'll go back again, and I'm going to go File. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and turn on one of these up here. Let's say, yeah, this one here. Notice that there's some transparency in there. So let me go ahead and take that text and let's move that in here. So you can see that transparency. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, let's turn off the other layers so that I can make sure that I have that. So you can barely see the text on that because the transparency is throughout. And that would be the only reason I can think of using a 24-bit ping. So anyway, if I go to File and I say that, that I want to export again, export, save for web, and you can see how it previews it. And now instead of 8-bit, I'll select here 24-bit. There you go. See, if I switch back to 8-bit, you see how it's grayed out, but it's solid. So that transparency that I added to Bagel within the circle is just going to be converted to kind of a chalky light color because that has to go opaque if it's an 8-bit. But if I want the transparency to remain within the circle and the 100% transparency or 0 opacity in the background, then it has to be a 24-bit. And now I can go ahead and I can save this one again. And hopefully it will take me to the same place. And I'll just name this one 20_24-bit so that I can tell the difference just by the name of the file. And if I, go back to the original, if I hide this for a minute, and I hide this for a minute, and I go back here, let's close this, and I look at these others that I've saved. Here's the 8-bit for Bagel, and it's got non-editable text in it, and here's that 24-bit one that's saved. And again, that's transparent. And then here's all the other ones that were saved within the assets by me renaming and relabeling the layers. And that is really the most efficient and effective way of maintaining a Photoshop file and at the same time saving multiple layers within that file ready for the web. So they don't have to be separate Photoshop files or, that you have to deal with. It's all, consolidated into one file. Okay. Carlos wants to know, how do I want the submission for these files? I don't want the Photoshop file. You can include that if you wish, but I want just the 3 files. I want the JPEG, GIF, and PNG. I want to see that they are each 500 pixels per inch square, and I want to see that they've been saved as JPEG, GIF, and PNG. The JPEG will be opaque and rectangular. The GIF will have a background that's transparent, and it doesn't have to be a circle, but it could be any shape. And then the PNG will be 24-bit, but you're going to include partial opacity or partial transparency, however you want to interpret that. Does that make sense to everybody? Let me bring Photoshop back up here. Let me go ahead and bring this back. And then, again, I know I'm bouncing around at the moment, but let's say, for example, I want this image right here. Maybe I think this is a nice one. And I want to download it. If you've never downloaded these images before, when I click on it and over to the right, I see the image and I can go to right click on it. And I can say that I want to save image as. Okay. And so here is this sunflower with a name after it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that in my optimized folder as well, just for the heck of it. So let's go on my desktop and scroll down so that it's optimized for web. And I'm just going to name it sunflowers. Okay. Now this is a Google web picture. And this has to be converted to a JPEG, and Photoshop, as far as I know, will not open it. So now we need to go through other machinations of converting it. I don't like it that Google does that, but that's what we have to do. So I'm going to save that. And let's see if I can convert it without much muss or fuss within the next 10 minutes or so, next 10, 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this. And if anybody remembers or has dealt with this, here's the sunflowers. And I'm going to right click on it. And what I want to do is I want to open with, I'm going to try to open with preview. Let's start with that and see if it will open it. Come on. No, it's not going to do it. Open with, how about here? Let's try this. There we go. So I'm going to drag this file. This is to convert. So what I need to do, and unfortunately what you may have to do, is I want to be able to open these files. So I have this file here, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag it into here. So now I should be able to open it in preview. Come on. Nope, I might have to redo this. So let's go back again and open with, let's say open all files. Okay, then what I need to do instead is, let's right click on here, open with, and let's look at other for a minute. And I do have an app on my computer that enables me to do that. You know what? I'm going to have to come back to you guys, because if I pause this, then I'm going to forget to turn it back on, and it's going to take me a minute here. Let's go ahead here and see if we can't do it. There is, let's try open all files again. I want to open it. Come on. No preview. That's really stupid. This is something that Google did this past year or two, and I still have not gotten used to it. And it really bugs the hell out of me. It's some new file format that they have for the web to make it work. And there has, yeah. Because if I drag this onto Photoshop, like so, and try to open it, it says that it can't complete the request because it's not a recognized file format. And that really bugs the hell out of me. Let's see if I have preview open. And I don't think I do. Okay. Let me do a search here under my, let me just look in the apps. And there is a program that should work. That might, you know what? Here, let me, you know what? Instead of opening it in Google or on Chrome, let me try, here, let's do this differently. So if you have something other than Chrome, here I have Safari here. Let's try that. So I'm going to do a search. And I'm going to look at sunflowers again. Okay, let's look at images. It might be something with Chrome. Let me right click here And let's go ahead and I'm going to say save image as. Let's try to put this on my desktop. And let's go to, again, desktop. So you use Snagit or snipping tool to capture your images from web? Okay. Oh, okay. Not aware of those. Thank you. Snagit or snippet. So I'm going to have to write that down and I'm going to have to look that up because those are new to me. Dan always teaches me something. And that's good to know. I need to learn from you. Snagit and snippet. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go to my desktop here because I'm in Safari's browser and I can go back to optimize here. And now I'll name it Sunflower. And it should probably be saved as a JPEG. And so now if I hide this and I go back in to that folder, let's see if I have another, there's the other sunflower here. Yeah, and then this is a JPEG file. So it has to do with using Chrome and using Google to do the search for the image. But again, I mean, now I can take this as a JPEG and I can just open it up in Photoshop. Okay. And there it is, teeny tiny little file. So that's something that you do have to be aware of. And it was really, really small. So if I look at this, I can go to image size, and you can see that it's only 275 by 183 pixels. Whoa, way too small. So for this assignment, that would be too small. Now I could enlarge it. I could change the size of this and I could say resample it so we can switch to pixels, you know, and let's change the width or let's change the height to 500 to see what this is going to look like. And what I want to do is preserve details and enlargement, and let's go ahead and try to reduce some noise at about 80, 85%. Let's see what it looks like. And let's zoom out a little bit. And you can see that there is some blurring. So it really is unsatisfactory when you take a small image like that and blow it up. I hope all of you can see how poorly that looks. Okay, and then I have another one here. So Snagit, I'm communicating here with Dan. Snagit is the best. And it's www. Well, all the rest of you can see that. TechSmith.com. Screen capture .html. Okay, cool. Thank you again, Dan. Snipping is the tool that's built into Windows. Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, it's something that's happened relatively, and I say relatively, unless somebody knows specifically. When they did it, it just happened. And before you would right click on it and you would download it and, save it on your desktop and you'd be done. Yeah, I can repeat again what each file type needs to be. You need a JPEG, you need a GIF or GIF.gif, and you need a ping.png for the assignment. The file size needs to be the 500 pixels per inch. The JPEG will be opaque and, full, on photographic image. The GIF, you should have some transparency in the background, perhaps. So that would be the reason for using the GIF. Otherwise, GIF files are typically larger than JPEGs. And then for the PNG file, you're going to have partial opacity so that you can actually see through the whole thing, including maybe the background. Giselle, you haven't received, did you send me an email, Giselle, for Google Drive? You did. Could you please send it to me again right now? And I will be sure and invite you so that somehow I overlooked it. Make sure that you send it to kirkmillerart@gmail.com. And it's possible that it could have gone into junk mail or something else. You never know. But I've tried to respond to everybody's email as quickly as possible. So go ahead and do that again right now. And remember in the subject, put your name, Art196, and Google Drive, so I know whose it is, what class, and what it's for. Okay. So is everybody else cool with everything? Are we done for today? So this is just a component that is part of lesson 10. When we actually get to that part of the textbook, and we've been developing our own website using Dreamweaver, what we'll do is that, they have images they've already prepared for us. And that's nice in completing the lessons, but when you're designing your own website, and for us, and I say us meaning in the graphic design area, or 3D modeling, or web design, or whether you're in print, or if you're a fine artist or photographer, it really doesn't matter. When you're designing a website for yourself, you want it to be graphically rich. That's the whole point of doing this website. Because next Tuesday, we're going to cover the basics of HTML. And if you wanted purely a text-based website, you wouldn't need Dreamweaver. You could use a text edit for it, and that would be it. In fact, that's what the browser was originally, or was created for, what the web was originally created for. Not the internet, but the web itself. It was created for sharing scientific papers online. And what the web has become over the past 15, well, it really took off in 96, 97. So, yeah, in the past 20 years, it's become a whole other animal. And much, much more complex, way more than back in the day. In order to accommodate all these changes. And because it's all open source, Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented HTML, never, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit for next Tuesday, never copyrighted or patented or anything HTML. It's open source, anybody can do it. So that's why you have the WWC3, which is a consortium of designers or, web people throughout the world that have a consensus of how to design and to prepare for the web. And also now that we're dealing with issues with people with disabilities, there are those issues that you have to deal with compatibility as well. So there are all these things that we have to deal with. Yeah, you can use HTML today. I mean, that's what we still use. That's what all of these web pages are, answering Dan's response on the chat, is that all of the pages that we will be creating are using HTML. But then to style them, if you want the text to look a certain color, to be a certain font, have a drop shadow or you want to add transparency or that sort of thing, then you need to add a style where we will be using cascading style sheets. And we will also be using Bootstrap and cascading style sheets to actually to create the basic structure for the web page as well, to make sure that it is responsive. And as I showed you the other day, when you're resizing the page, that it conforms to the size of the screen properly. Otherwise, if you just use plain HTML and you view it on a small screen, it just shrinks it down. And so you might have itty bitty teeny tiny type that's almost unreadable. And then you have to enlarge the screen on your phone, and it's just very awkward. So yeah, so that's what we'll be using, just the basics of HTML. Don't freak out. We're not going to be using a lot of it. I'm not an expert in HTML or CSS myself. I know enough to be dangerous. That's all I know. And that's what we'll be doing with remaining lessons. But this is to get you started. And next week, what we will also do is that, and you can do this over the weekend if you want, is that go to Wix.com and create an account, a free account, because that will be your first homework assignment, your second one technically, but the one that you will be working on over the next several weeks, creating a website using the free website builder on Wix. And again, it's we can go over that probably go over it maybe. We could possibly go over it, start it on Tuesday and work on it on Thursday, and then we'll see. Okay, so you can kind of get a feel for it, but yeah, I want you to play with it first, because there really aren't any tutorials for it. Okie doke. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. I have a division meeting I'm late for. And Giselle, you said you sent me an email, so let me look at that so I can confirm that I received it. And let's look at that. And you can see too. Not yet. You're sending it to Kirk Miller Art at gmail.com. Because it's not showing up. So I'm answering live, done. So the rest of you, if you want, can go. And then I'm gonna, right now I'm gonna say goodbye for today. I'm gonna stop recording and I will see everybody Tuesday. So work on, working with these images this week. Okay, so bye-bye. Have a good time, and then I will continue